Okay, so let's see what we get. So this is a board where you should use a small c-bet size. There's arguments to be made for 50%, pernickety, but in general, paired board, small c-bet size, very difficult for the big blind to connect with this board. Unfortunately, the big blind has connected significantly in this situation, but if you imagine him having, his defend range of king 10, king 9, king 8, queen 10, all these hands are relatively difficult. They don't connect with the board. There's no straight draws. There's not very many pairs. The big blind doesn't have a 3 very often. Things like this. This is a board where you can just bet your entire range for a small size, and so like we said, this seems to be the issue to me. Big c bets. I guess I'll continue on. We face a check raise. I would definitely call, but I would be very concerned, especially when you bet really big on the flop, and then you face a check raise. I would be pretty scared. I would expect the range to be under bluffed. Like, the big blind here probably should check raise. Well, maybe not versus this size, but in general should be check raising bluffs like 9-10, queen 10, maybe like spades, backdoor spades, flush draws, 3x. So this turn is particularly good for the big blind. I would be very cautious. I probably wouldn't fold, but I'm not happy about it whatsoever. Like, against if you're on a sim, like against pile solver, it's going to tell you to call, but if people are not bluffing enough, this can be getting actually pretty close. You'd much rather have Jack 10 with a club. Ace river, we face a jam. I mean, I wouldn't hate a fold here. It sounds silly, but it's so difficult for the big blind to be bluffing. You have a ton of flushes. You have more 3x than they do. But anyway, it's just a cooler, really. So we are using some 3x's. I wasn't sure about. I only saw 2.5 when I went over the pre-flop section. Not a terrible idea at the lower stakes, but I would just 2.5 personally. I also wouldn't change sizes. There was a time when I played where I would get a sample on people and I would change my, if they defended a bit too much, I would 3x. If they defended too tight, I would 2x. But it's too obvious, I think, that kind of thing, and it just complicates. The EV difference between a 3x and a 2.5 is relatively minimal. Don't overload your brain with things that you don't need to be concerned about. Just have a raise size and a raise range and just use it, would be my advice. But with 3x, again, this is a board where I would use a small bet size. Usually, most monotones I would just use a small size, but there are some where medium or maybe even big is reasonable. But I think it's pretty reasonable to just use small always. And I would always bet this hand. You will run, if you run sims, they will have this hand maybe checking sometimes to like protect your range, to give you some 2-pair combinations. Forget that kind of stuff. We're playing 50NL, we're playing straightforward, simple poker. We want to make it difficult, like raise first in a lot, make it difficult for the big blind, to force them to a difficult decision. C-bet and flop, C-bet a lot, C-bet small whenever it's appropriate. Put them to difficult situations, make them not realise equity. Just play simple would be my advice. So I would bet flop small, and then as played I would definitely bet turn. All good. So we're back to the 2.5. Again, this flop, exact same thing. This is a pretty decent example, right? It shows you the percentages here. 53% versus 47%, so they're a favourite. But if we see bet a third pot, this is just an instant fold from the big blind. We have to make sure these hands don't see free cards. I don't hate. Well, I do. I don't like checking this back. I would bet my range. again, like that's been the first three hands I would bet range, and I would use a small size on each of them. But if you were going to check here, you want to check a hand like this is a good hand. It's an open ender. You've got two overcards. If the turn comes the Jack of Hearts and they probe 3/4 pot, you probably call, right, but it's like you don't love it. It's not really a hand I'd look to check. If you had a club, I would like to check more because you can always continue on the turn. I would delay c-bet the turn here. Relatively difficult to find bluffs because usually you would use bluffs that have equity. But if he has a club, you're drawn dead. But you do have equity against a pair of aces or against two pair or things like that. So I would usually use this hand as a bluff. And as played, I would bluff for sure. It's a split pot most of the time. You might even want to use an even bigger size here. In general, when people check here in the big blind, they're just going to have what he has, and you really want to make it difficult for them to defend that. So maybe an overbet would be reasonable. But yeah, common theme so far seems to be a bit too much caution. Again, a small size is very appropriate. Arguably, you could just bet your entire range, particularly at 50NL where you have to be tighter in the big blind. So the big blind shouldn't have like Queen 5 off, Queen 4 off, Jack 5 off. They don't have as many fives as usual, and especially when you should have a decent amount of 5s and 4s, you really want to bet those 5s and 4s for a small c-bet size. And you know, King 2, you have a club, you can fold out King 3, you can fold out King 6, 7, 8, 9 maybe. Maybe not, that's a small bet, but you can fold out hands like 10-8 offsuit, hands that have a lot of equity against you. You know, it says here they've got 61%. I'm not sure if we get to see their hand, but no, okay. I like this delay. You have equity. You can represent the ace well. This seems like a good bluff. I like this. But yeah, just bet flop. Okay, 2.5. Again, c-bet your entire range for 1/3 pot. Okay, yeah, it seems to be a lot of kind of fancy, tricky, trying to be sneaky type stuff. Like, we've only reviewed like 5 or 6 hands so far, and all of them, we've seen a 2-pair check back on a monotone. We see kings. This is a reasonable check back, right? Kings on 6, 6, 8, sort of. Like, I would just bet range, but like if you do have a check range, like aces and kings are very reasonable. Because they don't need protection and they can protect that check back range, but there's just no need for it. Like, my advice would be decide which play makes most money. Does betting small make most money? Probably. Like, unless you know that they are going to just probe 3 times pot with a lot of bluffs and you really want to check back to trap that with like a very comfortable call down, there's just too many unknowns. Just play very simple ABC poker, no nonsense. And then bet delaying is obviously great. But we probably missed out on some value there. Like, we could get 3 streets.
If you enjoyed this video from Heads Up Crusher dougiedan, and if you want to learn more heads up strategies that work from both him and Doug Polk, head over to upswingpoker.com and join the Upswing Lab training course. This course is a structured learning environment that will show you step by step how to become the best no limit hold'em player at the table. And this course doesn't just cover heads up, it really covers all things no limit hold'em. We got cash games, tournaments, live poker, heads up, play and explains if you want to watch the coaches play and explain their thoughts as they're doing so. And it also comes with a no limit simplified section for people who are kind of just getting into poker strategy. This teaches a simplified approach to the game that is a really nice on-ramp to more advanced strategies later on. Elite coaches have been adding content to this course for over 6.5 years, and we've kept it updated along the way with pre-flop charts, lessons, pretty much anything you can ask for to get better at no limit hold'em. So if you want to take your no limit hold'em game to the highest level, head on over to upswingpoker.com, go under the training tab, select the Upswing Lab, and join today.